Hey everyone, I'm Andrew with UWorld College Prep team, and today we're going to talk about diagramming sentences. And for all of you visual learners, we're also going to throw some things up on the lightboard. Let's dive right in. Now, while there's a lot of minutia to technically and comprehensively diagramming a sentence, the core components, that is, separating the independent clause from the rest of the sentence, can go a long way towards making sure that all of your questions on the SAT and ACT are grammatical, if nothing else. And so what that's going to mean is that you can take the subject and verb from a sentence, the main thing being communicated that can stand all by itself, and separate it from all the other just descriptive language that is in a sentence. And if it still sounds a little bit technical, let's go ahead and look at an example, and I think it's going to make a lot more sense. So here we have a pretty long sentence. And so it's not immediately clear where every part of it is and what every part of it is doing. But if we section it off at each of the punctuation marks, we're going to find that just describing what either side of each of those punctuation marks is doing makes diagramming the sentence trivial, or makes it really easy at least. So let's just start at the top. So almost 200 years ago, we can ask ourselves, what's that doing? Well, it's really just kind of setting a place or a time for the rest of the sentence to be going on. There's no subject, there's no person or thing that's doing something, there's no verb, there's no action that's being done. So we can say that's just descriptive and kind of ignore it for now. Next, the author po. So this is definitely just a subject or just a noun. We can see that it's a person, place, or thing, and that it's likely going to be doing something in the rest of the sentence that we haven't seen what that is yet. So let's just hold on to that for now. Next, we have this kind of long phrase, or this long clause, whose personal life was plagued by tragedy, and some information about that tragedy. Does sound like a complete thought. You say personal life was plagued, that's a subject and a verb, we've got a complete clause here. The whose, though, marks it as dependent, not independent. And what that means is that you couldn't just write whose personal life was plagued by tragedy, period, without having other information this is describing. The long and short of that is really that we can mark this off as not the independent clause, it's just parenthetical information describing the rest of the sentence. In this case, describing the author po. So let's move on to the last piece of the sentence. All we've got here left over is wrote the raven. And so it's probably pretty clear from the word wrote there that this is the verb, this is the thing that is being done in the sentence. And so since we already identified before that we need a subject and a verb to make a complete sentence, if we take that subject and verb that we isolated and ignore all the other descriptive information, all we have left with at the bottom is the author po wrote the raven. Now you might be asking me, Andrew, how does this help me on the exam itself? And this is a good question, but the SAT and the ACT are both very prone to asking questions that complicate an independent clause or make it less clear where the independent clause starts and stops. And the way that they're going to do this is by adjusting information at the punctuation or at the subject level at each of these three locations. So let's call this one 1, this section 2, and this final one down here 3. So at sections 1, 2, or 3, we could have those punctuation marks being asked to change. And so what you might see in any of those situations is having, instead of the comma, a period, a colon, a dash, or maybe no punctuation at all. Now the reason these punctuation marks don't work is that periods and colons and semicolons, for example, all have to follow a complete independent clause. Since we've already identified that the independent clause doesn't end until the very end of the sentence, none of these other places can hold either of those other punctuation marks. A dash is a little more complicated. The reason that those can't go in there is not that a dash can't go in the middle of an independent clause, but that when it does, it has to have another dash after it somewhere. For example, if we had a dash before whose and a dash after tuberculosis, the sentence would be fine. It would make perfect sense. But without that, we can say that no pair, no dash. So we can eliminate that section altogether as well. Finally, if we took out punctuation at any given one of these sections, we would have an unclear separation between the subject and the verb. Since we couldn't say, for example, the author, comma, wrote the raven, then we can't also place only a single comma here after po or after tuberculosis. Now, punctuation aside, the test might also ask you to change this whose or this wrote into something else. Maybe, for example, instead of whose personal life, you could say his personal life, or and his personal life. And similarly down here, you might say he wrote, or just po wrote. So for example, if we said he wrote the raven or his personal life was plagued by tragedy, those clauses on their own make sense, but they don't make sense in the middle of a sentence. So since we've already identified that the main sentence is saying the author po wrote the raven, we couldn't stop that down and say the author po he wrote the raven, or the author po his personal life is something wrote the raven. You can have two independent clauses in a sentence, but one needs to come after the other one is over, not in the middle of it. Finally, they might also change this word wrote here into another verb form, like writing or written or had written. And so while some of that has to do with tense, and you could kind of look at the sentence and say, well, when is this happening? And which one makes the most sense? More often than not, they're just going to throw a verb in there that couldn't be a verb on its own. And so if we ignore all the other information and we look just at our independent clause down here, since you couldn't say the author po writing the raven or the author po written the raven, those two verb forms don't function as a main verb of the sentence, and our identification of this independent clause makes it clear that they can't be the right answer. All that to say, diagramming sentences and isolating the independent clause in particular can decrease the stress and the challenge of a lot of the questions on the grammar sections of the SAT and the ACT. So while you're practicing these questions anyway, take some time to practice identifying the different parts of a sentence. And what you're going to find is that the test is going to get easier, the section is going to feel less stressful, and that your score on the ELA portion of either exam is going to go up. I hope this has been helpful information. If it has, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this one. Keep studying and prepping with UWorld, and all your hard work is going to pay off. See you next time.